Okay, so we went through the first 3 steps of the scientific method on your last at-home assignment, and now you should pretty much have those, at least you should have your problem, and you should have a hypothesis by now. We're now going to talk about step 4, which is the experiment. So we're going to do a workshop tomorrow, and we'll go over the workshop at the end of this PowerPoint. But we're going to do a workshop to help you see what an experiment looks like and what you should be looking at. So your next step is to, once you come up with your hypothesis, your materials list, your next step is to develop your experiment. So you will be taking notes on this again. Make sure you have paper and pencil. I put that in the Edmodo post, so you should be ready to go. But basically, the experiment helps you to, you're going to have to develop procedures for your experiment. So you're going to decide that you're going to do whatever experiment you're going to do to solve your problem. So develop and follow a procedure. The procedure should basically be, first you do this, next you do this, next you do this, so that anybody that picks up your science fair project can follow your same procedures. Within that, you need to include a detailed materials list. And when you decide on your experiment, you need to make sure your outcome is measurable. So it has to be some kind of data you can collect from your experiment. The word for that is quantifiable. Okay, so when you do an experiment, we're only going to look at step 4 of the scientific method tonight. So when you do your experiment, you have variables. Okay, so do you know the difference between an independent variable and a dependent variable? Well, let's talk about what a variable is. A variable is part of the experiment that either stays the same or changes, but it's basically the parts of the experiment. Okay, so in your notes, an independent variable. The independent variable or manipulated variable is a factor that is intentionally varied by the experimenter. So the independent variable is what you change. You can think of it as independent starts with I, and so it's what I change. Independent variable is what I change. Okay, so for example, we talked about the paper towels in your last at-home assignment. If you change the different brands of paper towels, so the brand of paper towel is your independent variable. So John is going to use 25 gram, 50 gram, 100 gram, 250 gram, 500 grams of sugar in his experiment. The amount of sugar he uses in the experiment is the independent variable. Dependent. The dependent or responding variable is the factor that may change as a result of changes made in the independent variable. In this case, it would be the size of the loaf of bread. So in the example, we didn't go over the example, but basically John wanted to know that if the amount of sugar that you put into when you baked bread changed the size of the loaf. So basically it's the variable that depends, or the result of what you changed. So when you change the paper towels, when we talked about the paper towels, when you change the paper towel brand, the amount of water that it absorbs is your dependent variable. So think of it this way. Dependent variable, remember independent is what I change. Dependent variable starts with a D, and it's basically the data that you collected. Okay, so if I'm going to use 3 different types of paper towels and I'm going to measure the amount of water each paper towel absorbs, then the amount of water that the paper towel absorbs is the dependent variable. So independent is what you change. Dependent is the data that you collected. So, with that being said, you're going to start thinking about an experiment you can do to test your hypothesis and to help solve your problem. But before we do that, we are going to do an activity in class to help you kind of see how the experiment process will work. So in class tomorrow, you will be working on this, the activity below. I'm going to walk you through it so that I don't have to spend the time in class walking you through it, okay? So basically you want to find what variables, and remember, variables are the things you change or the data that you collect, affect the motion of a pendulum. So it tells you here what a pendulum is. A pendulum is a mass suspended from a fixed point. So basically it's just something that hangs off of a string and it swings back and forth. Okay, so your materials that you will have are string, washers, pencil, ruler, and a stopwatch. Alright, and your problem. Remember, every scientific method has a problem. The problem is which variable, mass, length of the string, or the angle of release affects the period of the pendulum. The period of the pendulum is going to be basically when the pendulum swings once and comes back to the start. That's one time. So every time it comes back to where you released it, or back to the direction you released it, you're going to count 1, 2, 3 each time it swings back. Then you will write a hypothesis. So your group will write, we believe if we do this, then this will happen. Procedure. Now here is a very good example of how you will write a procedure for your experiment. Number 1, it tells you you're going to measure 30 centimeters of string using your ruler. Then you're going to tie a washer to the length of the string. Then you're going to tape the other end to your pencil and balance the pendulum off the edge of your desk. Then you're going to pull the washer back 45 degrees and release the washer. You're going to measure the time to complete 10 periods and you're going to record your data. So basically, however long it takes it to swing back to the starting point 10 times, you're going to measure your data. And here you see a data table for you to record that. And so the first variable that you are testing is the angle of release. So 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 15 degrees. Okay. That is what you are changing. So that is your independent variable. The time that it takes to swing back, or in 10 periods, is your dependent variable, the data you collect. Okay? Then you are going to repeat those steps for each of the variables. So then you're going to change the mass, and you're going to get to decide how you change the mass. And you're going to test it 3 times. And then you're going to change the length of the string, and you're going to test it 3 times. So you should have 2 new data charts to make sure to see which one affects the pendulum swing the most. Okay, so you're going to list the following for all 3 sections of your experiment. So for every section, so for every one, you're going to list the dependent variable, the independent variable, and the constant. The constant is just what stays the same. The fact that you're using the same pencil. You can have more than one constant. You're using the same pencil. You're using the same table. The same person is pulling it back. Okay? Those things, whatever stays the same is your constant. Dependent variables, the data you collect. Independent variable is what you change. Remember, independent, I change. Okay? So what is a control in an experiment? That's what we just talked about. So you will have to answer these 4 questions when your lab is over. Alright, so you should have notes on what an experiment is. You should have notes on what an independent variable is, what a dependent variable is, and then for your pre-lab, I just want you to write a summary of what you will be doing in your lab. So basically, 3 to 5 sentences about what I just went over. You will be doing in your lab to turn that in. You will not be able to do this lab and participate in this lab if you have not turned this at-home assignment in, because I need to know that you understand the lab before I let you start working on it. You can either take a picture of your notes on paper, or you can submit what you have written in your notes on your iPad into Edmodo.